And to look more closely at the failed BHP-Potash deal, I'm joined by Jonathan Barratt from Commodity Broking Services. Jonathan Barratt, welcome to Business Today.
Good morning, Whitney.
Okay, so this is the third attempt by Marius Kloppers to seal a major deal since taking over at the top of BHP. He's struck out each time. What does that say about his leadership?
Whitney, I think it's certainly going to be tested. Obviously, they've got an annual meeting today over in Perth. But I think people are going to start to question his ability to help BHP in terms of its global expansion. Remember, he did come to the foray and said, we're going to expand, but now he's sort of had 3 failed attempts. So I think that'll be questioned, but I think the people will still like the way he manages. So I don't think it'll be only questioned, but I don't think it'll be a big mark against him.
So you don't think he should be concerned at all that his tenure would be shortened?
No, I don't think so, not at all. I think that the way BHP is managed, you just look at where the share price is and how it's managed or weathered the GFC. I think everything seems to be okay. It's just that certain things outside of his control have come up, and as a result of that, it might just be just a mark against his name, but I don't think it's going to hurt anything going forward.
Well, as you say, there are some who like his management style. However, if we look at these deals, is he just too ambitious? And you know, some of the critics say that he's not sensitive to the political intricacies and the scrutiny that affects each of these deals.
Look, I don't think so. I think you all go through, you know, a project and you manage it correctly. I think if there's only ever one criticism with the potash deal was perhaps he didn't spend too much time lobbying the Canadian government, and I think if that's one criticism, it could be labelled against it. But overall, when you look at these types of projects, you know, you spend a lot of time.
Couldn't that indicate then that he is out of touch and that he's not really aware that he needs to actually engage, you know, directly with a government with a deal like this? Look, there's no secret that it's a national interest.
I think so, but I also got to think that the deal which was looked at was also a deal that was very politically sensitive, and you also had a minority government in charge. So you could say there's a little bit of or there should have been more lobbying done on BHP's behalf, but you also got to look at the political environment in Canada, and as a result of that minority government, then there are other concerns, I think, which were there. I mean, I must admit, you look at it, it is the second time in 25 years that a foreign ownership was actually rejected by Canada, so there must have been, I think, some other underlying themes surrounding the bid.
It's been revealed too that BHP spent $350 million in fees over this deal. How will shareholders react to that?
Oh, I think it's going to be interesting because they spent another $450 million with the Rio, and I'm not quite sure how much they spent with the BHP Rio Pilbara thing.
So surely he'll be raked over the coals over these.
I think it's costs, they're exorbitant costs in trying to get deals together. So I think that it's an adjustment, but it hasn't been reflected in the share price. And I think when I look at that, I think people and investors are still quite confident with his management style.
Do you think the potash story is over? There were a number of other bidders in the wings. Are we going to see somebody else emerge?
I think that's going to be an interesting thing, to actually see whether or not we do see someone come, or whether or not those bidders were actually real, or something that Potash were actually making up in order to extract a better price. So I think that'll be something I'll be keeping a close eye on, just to see whether anything will emerge, and also to see what happens with that one deal, and see what happens according to that.
Are there any candidates that you would sort of put in this category to take a tilt at Potash?
I think I'd certainly look towards China. Because I think China still needs to look to resource, and particularly when it comes to fertiliser, they need to secure that for their long-term growth perspectives. So something coming out of China, I would probably think is probably on the cards.
Now, if we look at this, these sort of assets broadly, they're becoming more and more valuable. So will governments make these types of deals more difficult to execute?
Oh, I definitely think they will. There is sort of a movement across borders which are suggesting those strategic assets from a lot of companies, a lot of countries are actually going to get be subject to more rigour, scrutiny by the government, so that we actually don't see the farm being sold off, so to speak. I mean, it's happened in New Zealand, and certainly in Canada it's also starting to happen. So I think that a lot of these strategic assets which countries own, I think you'll see there'll be a little bit more border protection starting to occur, particularly as we become more centralised in terms of global demand.
Now, BHP has also launched a share buyback. Do you think that they'll just sort of stay quiet for a moment after these 3 strikes?
I think they'll consolidate for a while, there's no doubt about it. I think the share buyback will obviously condense a little bit more return back to shareholders. But I think BHP, because they already have these facilities in place, will probably look at some other acquisition, in the oil and gas area. I think it just seems a logical step for them to take, seeing that they've already got it. But got the credit in line. But I don't think they're going to do it in a hurry. In fact, I probably think they'll probably take a bit of time off and then re-look to position their business and their business plan going forward.
All right. Speaking of oil, if we look at the crude sector, it's lost about 5% off its highs. What's behind that?
Well, this could be quite interesting for BHP as well, because they're starting to see a change in trend towards some of the commodities, and obviously on the back of a strengthening dollar. Crude oil in itself is off, as we've said, close to 5% from a high of 88.40, and we feel that a break through this 84.50 level could see oil come under significant pressure, because we still have such a build in inventories continuing, and that's a worrying when we're not seeing economic growth occurring, particularly in Europe. The US is starting, and with China starting to look to slow her economy, we could see a shift in sentiment towards some of our primary imports, and that in itself could actually affect the price for BHP.
And we've also seen copper, well, it's steadied, but it suffered recent losses as well. Is this signalling a trend in, a decline in base metals and also, broad commodities like crude? Yeah,
it certainly could, Whitney. When you look at it across the board, and I think all focus is purely on China at the moment, because we are hearing with CPI up to a 2-year high that they're going to start to increase interest rates again. That's certainly going to affect the demand for the primary imports, base metals and oil across the board. Remember, copper imports into China in the last quarter were down 26%. So it's already starting to occur at the moment. So I think if we continue to see that tightening bias, that's going to affect the demand for these primary imports, in particular for copper, and I think we'll see a realignment in prices. That might be a concern for Australia in terms of its growth forecasts over the next 1 to 2 quarters.
All right, Jonathan Barratt, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining the program.
Thanks, Whitney.